Will Ex Machina just be another tale of artificial intelligence coming to life, or will it bring something new to the table? Let's check it out. Ex Machina tells the tale of a young computer programmer named Caleb, played by Domhnall Gleeson, who is summoned to Nathan's research facility to test a new AI that Nathan has developed. Nathan, played by Oscar Isaac, is somewhat of a recluse engineer who also happens to be the owner/CEO of this company, who is responsible for the world's largest search engine named Blue Book. Caleb is tasked to test the validity of the AI robot, Ava, played by Alicia Vikander, via the use of a Turing test. As the movie unfolds, we see the experiment begin to unravel as cracks begin to emerge in Nathan's story, as the entire experiment is fundamentally flawed. As a side note, both Domhnall Gleeson and Oscar Isaac can be seen later this year in Star Wars: The Force Awakens. So let's move on to some of the positives. One of the first things that will jump out at you is the cinematography and production design of this movie. This movie is shot in a remote location out in the vast wilderness with these huge mountain ranges on both sides of you. It helps to establish this vibrant color palette that is contrasted with the gray tones of the research facility. This movie has remarkable use of these wide establishing shots of the mountains and the trees that help to create an atmosphere that is simply breathtaking. The entire setup of this premise is very interesting, as it does a very good job of creating this nice sci-fi feel to it with the isolation of this research facility. And you kind of get this mad scientist vibe from Oscar Isaac's character, kind of reminiscent of Dr. Reinhardt from The Black Hole. And the architecture of this research facility is amazing. I'm somewhat of an amateur architecture enthusiast, so when I saw this location and structure, I was amazed. I enjoyed seeing that. And that brings us to the big one, Ava. As you can see in the poster and in the trailers, that the CG work with her is on point. They do a really good job of making her believable as a robot, both in the way that she acts and the way that she looks. I am so happy that CG has come this far to give us such surreal imagery that looks real. And the story revolving around her and her interactions with Caleb was amazing. Simply because, well, it's just those two sitting in a room talking together. So moving on to the negatives, we have to talk about stories of artificial intelligence. If you are new to these types of stories, then this movie may blow you away. However, if you're familiar with stories of AI and robots acquiring sentience data, then this should be familiar territory for you. However, because I was so versed in this kind of mythos, I was able to anticipate some of the story turns. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I do enjoy seeing new people in new settings and bringing their new perspectives to this type of subject matter. I just want to establish here that if you have some familiarity with these types of stories, then some of it will not come as a surprise to you. Other negatives that I want to talk about has to deal with the pacing. This movie may move a little too slow for some people at times, because once the premise has been established, it does take a little while for some meaty things to happen. Now, it wasn't an issue for me the first time through, but it could be upon repeated viewings, because the movie is chopped up into these little sessions that Caleb has with Ava, with his entire interview process with trying to establish her AI. There is nudity in this film that I don't think I had a problem with, but it may be an issue for some. I just don't think that the human naked form is something that I don't think we should hide from. Lastly, things work out rather quickly in the third act. It does tie up the story arcs, but I would have liked to have had just a little bit more time to digest it. They gloss over a lot of the technologies, which may be an issue for some, but you have to think of it more of a philosophical piece rather than a technical documentary. And that brings us to the scoring. As always, acting, directing, and story are worth a possible 2 points. The acting in this was terrific, especially from Domhnall Gleeson and Alicia Vikander. Oscar Isaac even holds his own, so I gave it a full 2 points. The directing, it was fairly well shot. The visual effects were integrated seamlessly. And aside from a few pacing issues, the overall execution was fairly well done. So I gave it a 1.5 out of 2 for directing. The story was an interesting premise. It had a great sci-fi feel to it. So I gave it a 1.5 out of 2. Cinematography and score are both ranked out of a possible 1 point. As I mentioned before, the cinematography in this was outstanding, so I gave it a full point. And the score, I don't recall any memorable themes, but it all fit well. I gave it a 0.5 out of 1. And that brings us to the watchable factor. Yeah, this movie is worth seeing at least once. And upon reflecting on it, I do want to watch this movie again. So I gave it a 1.5 out of 2 for the watchable factor. Adding all that up, that gives us an 8 out of 10 for Ex Machina in my movie review. Interesting. So you see how I rank movies. I don't even know the final score until I add it all up. And when I see it, it's like, really? 8 out of 10? Yeah, it's a good movie. So, whoa. What did you mean in the beginning when you said the entire experiment was fundamentally flawed? Okay, well, it's fundamentally flawed in the aspect that they were working under the assumption that we have free will to decide our own destinies. But I don't want to get into that because that is a topic meant for a different forum. Okay, so that's my review for Ex Machina. If you've liked what you've seen, please hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. So let's talk about a few of the spoilers. This movie is an interesting premise that has to deal with artificial intelligence acquiring sentience. And I like that story. I like robots eventually being able to think for themselves. Of course, it does have some of the similar tones of the warnings of them turning against us. I totally get that. But upon seeing this, I was always thinking in my head, well, you're still working under the assumption that we have free will. And if you really think that, then it's hard to create an AI. You can only set up things in such a way that it doesn't really work like that. From what I have learned to come and accept, because I believe in a very deterministic view. I believe that everything is determined to be a certain way. But as I said in my initial review, that is meant for a larger discussion, not this. And I just would have liked it if they had addressed that in this movie.